Thank you everyone for attending. We've had one of the highest turnouts to date, and that's possible thanks to all of you. I'm really excited to present this event. I think these days, more than ever, it's really important to be thinking about what does HR look for in a chemistry graduate, whether you're a graduate literally leaving uni, or maybe you've recently been a graduate, or you will be soon. It's always important to think about what the employer wants and what HR through the employer or through a talent acquisition service is looking for. And today I am happy to present to you our two guests. We will have Francisca Rosario, who is a business development specialist for STEM at Kelly Services. We also have Keely Munro, who is the principal consultant for science at Kelly Services. And so both of them should offer a wide breadth of experience for what specifically they're looking for, or what HR is looking for in chemistry graduates such as yourselves. And in case any of you are curious why I'm here and not William, we're just mixing things up a bit. If you haven't seen me before, you may have heard of me through email, all the emails sent out by the Early Careers Chemist group. I'm the secretary for the group. So it should be a bit of fun presenting for all of you tonight. So before I go into exactly the larger scope of this presentation, we always have a little spiel about what RACI is, what the Early Careers Chemist group. It's important to keep the group alive with not only new members, but to keep it relevant and to stay connected with you. So I want you to specifically have an idea of who we are and why we're doing this. We are the New South Wales branch of the Early Careers Chemists group. There's actually one in Victoria, Queensland, and potentially more coming soon. And we all fall under the Royal Australian Chemical Institute, or RACI. And we're at the ECCG, we're a bit of a mix. We've got undergraduates, we've got PhD students, we've got people currently working in industry, and we regularly have members such as yourselves joining through the annual general meetings. So you could say we're a diverse bunch. And as to what we do, like what our whole purpose is to essentially help young or early career chemists such as yourselves through events such as hosting Q&A events, like we've had Ask an Environmental Chemist recently. We also, when COVID permits, do site tours, and we've had a whole range, whether it's to chemical manufacturing plants, testing facilities, a whole range of facilities basically, and it's always exciting to see who will allow us access into their building. We have also done career development workshops, such as speed networking. Some of you may recognize Francisca Rosario from last year's speed networking event, co-hosted with Kelly Services. And so that's a popular event that always gets packed out every year. And I guess you could consider this a career development workshop since it's a bit more general in nature. We also, as far as how you could get involved with us, and this is something we have been asked a few times, the path is pretty straightforward, and I encourage it because it definitely does help, I guess, build your, concern with your career to attend something outside of just your studies or just an internship. So attending events helps. You can get networked, you can learn a little bit more about people in the industry and what they're doing and who your potential future employers are. You can take that a step further if you want and become an RACI member. It's optional. I'm not like pressuring any of you to do it. I just recommend it because I'm a member and I get good value out of it. There's also the option to join us at the ECCG committee when we have our annual general meeting. And like I said, lots of members are the ones who join us and have been extremely helpful in helping us adapt and bringing in fresh perspectives. And just to give you a few examples of how that actually looks in practice, last year we had Andrew Gray join us as our marketing director, and he's produced all this wonderful marketing material for us. That was in his first year. It's been a relatively small commitment for him, but he's been able, with a small amount of his time, to produce a lot of value. And I think it's a great opportunity for you to maybe have some extra responsibility, maybe show some leadership skills if that's something you want to develop. So watch this space come November when we have our annual general meeting. And very briefly about the RACI, in case any of you think it's some big ominous organization, it's really just a bunch of professionals, academics and students and fellows. They, as it says, they're the voice of chemistry in Australia, and they essentially are a great networking resource. And when I say networking, try not to think so much of a bunch of people aggressively competing for the same job and through nepotism, you know that one person. It's more, think about it like, if you have a particular problem, you might know the person that can help you solve it just because you've essentially been professionally social and you've kept up to date with who people are, what the current problems they're working on are. And it can be quite useful to have that network just sitting in your pocket. And as far as what RACI has actually done, I've just included a couple of key examples in case it's interesting to you. For example, the Australian National Titration Competition. Many of you may have seen this as you were going through high school. And I think at UNSW and various schools now, because of COVID, they've been hosting these events, and it's developed, I think, one of the most critical skills for a chemist, which is not titration, not playing around with colorful beakers of liquid, but attention to detail and precision, which is basically, like, I'd argue, the core skills of being a chemist and what employers, I think, look for. As far as what RACI does more broadly, they've made policy statements, whether it's about funding changes to university, they've made statements on climate change and chemical weapons, so they do stay relevant. And there's a lot of branches as well, which I think is the most important part. When I said earlier that RACI helps with networking, it's in that if you want to, in an academic sense, know that what's the latest in your industry, you'll go to conferences, right? You'll do your honors or PhD, go to a few conferences and learn what the latest thing in that really specialized area you're working on is. But what some of these branches do is they also keep a lot of professionals in the loop. So people outside academia, you might learn and get access to, for example, people at Sydney Water, at chemical manufacturing plants, at testing facilities, all sorts of people. And it all comes down to what your interests are and what you're studying. So again, no pressure, but it's purely just to make you aware of what the opportunity is. And as for this next section, I had prepared a very brief intro on Kelly Services, but I'll skim over it very briefly because I think Francisca can elaborate on this in much better detail than my cursory Google did. But having been exposed to Kelly Services a few times by myself before, I can say, just in a general sense, I'm very happy to bring these two to you. They're very experienced within Kelly Services. A lot of people in Kelly have science backgrounds, and they can recruit people essentially at a wide range of stages in the talent pool, whether you're a graduate, PhD, senior level, and they do have a global presence as well as just being within Australia. And there's a bunch of resources. They cover a bunch of different industries, as you can see listed here. But in saying that, I am the amateur here. I'd like to hand it over to the professionals. And so without further ado, I'll stop my screen share and pass you over to Keely, who will, Francisca will host, but Keely will run you through the presentation on what Kelly Services is and how they can potentially give you advice on what HR looks for.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jordan, for the introduction. And with me, I have Keely Monroe. I am Francisca Rosario. I'm the Business Development Specialist for the STEM industry, and I've been with Kelly Services for about 2 years now. So what we'll do is we'll walk you through a presentation and share with you more tips about the job sourcing steps and processes in place, how to really win an interview, and what HR looks for in chemistry graduates and how to get positions within STEM. So without further ado, I'll let Keely introduce herself.
Thanks, Francisca. Yeah, so I'm a chemist actually, like all of you. So I've got a Bachelor of Science and a Master's in Science and Chemistry. And I'm very passionate about individuals getting into the workforce from a chemistry background, especially. And I'm just going to go through a little bit, more about us and follow through on this. So Fran, if you could click through to the next, that would be great. So a little bit about who are we. So we are scientific specialist recruiters, specializing in scientific placements. One thing that I would say is quite recent news, and something that we're all really excited about, is that we've recently merged with Programmed, which is one of Australia's largest employers. We actually have over 15,000 people in work every day as an Australian company. So it's really exciting to join and be a part of such an amazing organization. That changes a little bit from what Jordan had said at the beginning about our website, because our website, while it's still available and you can go to it, it's not active or being updated. So please don't go there if you're looking for job opportunities. You'll actually find them over on the Programmed website. So we are operating in many places, but our scientific specialists specifically are in Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane, and Perth. And in the Perth team, it's myself and another chemist, Emma Patton, that leads the team there. And then over in New South Wales, we've got Francisca, who you met a little bit a few minutes ago, and then Purvi Mehta, who is the scientific recruitment consultant. So Purvi is really the one that, if you're based in New South Wales and you're a job seeker, you should really connect with her on LinkedIn and introduce yourself to her. Next slide, please.
Just having a little bit of a technical difficulty. There we go.
Perfect. So why should you use the recruitment agency? Well, the first important point is that we're actually a relationship link between companies and you. When you apply for a job, you might be against 100 other applicants, but as a recruiter, we have connections across loads of scientific industries, and we're able to make that link between you and that employer. We also have access to a large hidden market. So basically not all of our, not all of the roles that we have available are actually advertised. In fact, we do a lot of working with individuals to try to connect them with their best employer based on their skill set. So sometimes it's just getting access to that hidden market that we have in our hand, basically. We can also assist with interview skills and resumes to help you position yourself better in front of the employer. And we have that ability to discover some of your key strengths. So sometimes we know you better than you know yourself. And we try to uncover some of those aspects for the employer. And we're a bit like matchmakers, really. And that's, I think, why I love my job so much. It's actually finding that perfect match between the employer and the employee. And the good thing for all of you is that it is a free service to candidates, and it's a paid service for our clients. So some of the industries that we recruit for, well, there's a whole heap of them. You can see them on the screen there, but it's anything from food and beverage, a lot of life sciences. Over here in Western Australia, we do a lot in mining and energy. We have government contracts all across Australia. So there's a lot of new scientific opportunities that are uncovered with those government contracts. We do a lot of research and development for all sorts of areas, manufacturing, anything you can think of where a scientific degree may be required, we recruit for it. So we do both temporary and permanent recruitment at Kelly and Programmed. So what's great about temporary assignments for graduates, young early career graduates, is that it gives you an opportunity to try a lot of different things and uncover what you really like to do. It gives you some broad experience as well, so you're not pigeonholing yourself into one area or another. And in some cases, this can be a few weeks that you'd be working, up to a few months, and it's a great way to gain some experience. The permanent recruitment process is quite a bit different than the temporary recruitment process. In most cases, it's a much longer recruitment process. So for instance, for a temporary placement, we might contact you one day and you might be in work a day or 2 days later, and it may or may not have an interview process. Whereas permanent, there will definitely be an interview process, and it can be multiple interviews in many cases. And in that instance, the client will be employing you directly rather than working for a recruitment agency and being on site at one of our clients. So getting into the nitty-gritties about how you get yourself a job, well, the first step is, of course, making a resume. So if you haven't started your resume, now is the time. Make sure that you get onto it. So what's the purpose of the resume? Well, it's a personal selling tool. It is your first impression for that employer, and it's designed to give companies just enough information to make them want to interview you. So you don't want to make this a huge essay. You want to make it short and sweet, lots of little dot points, which we'll get into. But you want to make yourself stand out a little bit from the crowd. And it's a really great opportunity for you to showcase your strengths and achievements. So some of the things that you should include in your resume are, for instance, a personal, your personal information. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a resume land on my desk and it didn't even have a telephone number. So how am I going to contact you for a job? All right, so this is very important. Make sure that it's got your name, your address, your email, and your telephone number. That needs to be there. Objective, now this can, some people have differing opinions as to whether or not that you should or shouldn't have an objective. The important thing to remember though is if you do have an objective on your resume, make sure it's relevant for the position that you've applied for. Again, how many times I've seen people have an objective for a different role than they've applied to with me, and it just doesn't set, or give the right opinion. Also, the work experience and volunteer work, this is really important. Now, as graduates, you may or may not have experience specific to science, but that's okay. Don't think that just because you were working, in retail or fast food or anything like that, that you shouldn't include it because you're applying for a science role. What it does is it shows some skill sets that are transferable and make you more employable for a future employer. So make sure that you've got that. And also the volunteer work, that just shows, your community involvement, what type of person you are, and whether, gives another reason to set you apart from others. Of course, list your education, the courses, the dates, the institute, and even the country. Myself, I'm from Canada, so all of my scientific degrees were Canadian, so I had all of that on there because otherwise people may not recognize the university and not sure, how to do some research on where you've studied. So make sure that you've got that on there. So other information, you could include your awards, your certificates, any training courses. And with references, best not to include their actual contact details. Best just to have a little statement around references are available upon request. Although employers are not supposed to, or recruitment agencies, sometimes that information is not used in the best way. So just to protect your references, make sure that you just don't include their information. And when you're asked for it, then you can provide it and move forward at that stage. So the do's and don'ts. So importantly, use bullet points, okay? Nobody has the time to go through a major essay or read major paragraphs on you. So the bullet points just give it, enough information, and it's easy to read in a very quick period of time. You want to use a design that stands out from the crowd, and you want to quantify wherever possible, especially with the dates. That's really important. We want to know when you were working somewhere. If you write 2020, we have no idea if that was one day in 2020 or if it was, the entire year. All right. So make sure that you're putting that information in there. You want to proofread carefully. Typos can be deadly. I've had it many times where a quality manager was a quality manger, and honestly, quality managers are supposed to have really great attention to detail, so it's just not setting the right example. So definitely make sure that you go through that very carefully. You want to include your up-to-date contact information so that you can be reached about those job opportunities. And you want to have a professional email address. You don't want coolguy96@hotmail.com. If you don't already have one, make sure that you can register for free on Hotmail, Gmail, any of those free services. And you can set up a very professional looking email address of your first name dot your last name. Please know that actually we're screening resumes, and not just recruitment agencies, but all employers are screening resumes very quickly. In fact, less than 2.5 seconds. So that's why it's really important to make it stand out and be all of the information that's relevant to be right there. Okay, and if you haven't done so already, make sure that you activate your mobile message bank so that you can actually receive messages from future employers or potential employers. What you don't want to do is lie. It's just easier to tell the truth, and I can guarantee it's going to be found out a little bit later on. It's best not to include first person pronouns, I, me, my. Better just not to include any of those pronouns when you're doing your dot points anyhow. You don't want to include your date of birth, your height, your weight, your marital status, your religion, or your ethnicity. This is really important. In Australia, we're definitely not supposed to be discriminating, but don't give someone the opportunity to discriminate either by including that information. So best just not to include it. You don't want to go beyond 4 pages. In fact, a great CV is about 2 pages, 3 maximum. And if you haven't already, have a Google of Elon Musk's 1-page resume because it's pretty impressive. And you don't want to have time gaps. So if there is a gap for some reason, try to explain it away by saying that it was, put the date period and have that you were studying, or if you were on maternity leave or raising a family, just make sure that you would fill in those gaps. So you've aced the resume and you've gotten yourself an opportunity to get in front of an employer and got the interview. So a few things to remember and to bear in mind and make sure that you are looking into, especially around preparation, is to do some research on the company. Employers are so impressed if you walk in and you've read their website, you've got a lot of information about who they are and what they do. It just really makes a big difference, and it shows that you've got that that interest in their company as well. You want to think about the interview outfit. You want to look your best. So, you want to put on your most formal outfit that you can think of. Maybe not your ball gown or prom dress, but you want to make sure that you're dressed up to impress on that first interview. You also want to prepare your transportation. You don't want to be late, but alternatively, you don't want to be early either. It's really important to note that this is a respect thing for the employer's time. So if you're arriving any more than 5 minutes in advance, make sure that you go and have a coffee or something so that you're arriving just before your interview time. Arriving early, it's just an inconvenience for whoever's interviewing you. So it's just as important not to be too early as it is to not be late. So plan it all in advance, your bus route, your train, or if you're driving, just to make sure that you're there and you're ready for that interview. So upon arrival, when you walk in, you want to be, as I said, punctual. The eye contact is really important. You don't want to be looking down and not making that eye contact. It just means, again, that you're interested in the person that you're there with. And then the handshake, it's an important one. If you haven't practiced a handshake, make sure that you do. You want to have a nice firm handshake when you go in for that interview. So there's lots of different styles as well for the interview. Most likely though, you're going to have behavioral questions more so than even your technical questions. It's really important to companies that you fit in culturally with their organization and that you have the right behaviors for their organization as well. So more often than not, that is the majority of the questions during an interview. And then you may be asked a few technical questions to test your chemistry abilities and experience that you've had along the way. You want to make sure that you're answering the questions concisely. You don't want to go off on a big tangent. Make sure that you're answering the questions that they ask. And you want to elaborate when you're prompted and listen and build rapport with the interviewer. And be honest. If you don't know the answer or can't provide an example, it's okay. You can just tell them or just ask them to come back a little bit later and address the question at a later point in the interview. So lots of behavioral interviewing styles. So you may have heard of the STAR, CAR, or SOAR technique. They're basically all the same thing. STAR, situation, task, action, result. Your CAR is you've got a challenge, an action, and a result. And SOAR, it's a situation, objection, or obstacle, and then an action and a result that come from it. But basically, this is how you can format your answers to put your answers together so that it's a good response to the questions that the interviewer is asking. So the behavioral technique is used by employers, as I said, to evaluate a candidate's experience and behaviors in order to determine their potential for success. So lots of examples of different types of behavioral questions on the side there. You can have a little read of those. And then if you can switch the slide, Francisca, perfect. So here's an example. So perhaps they've asked you the question, have you ever noticed a task being performed unsafely? So how you would work through a STAR answer to this is that you wouldn't necessarily need to be prompted to give further information, but you just work your way through your situation, the action that you took, and what the result was of that situation. So if that question was asked of you, have you ever noticed a task being performed unsafely? You could say the power cord to the HPLC had always run along the floor to be plugged in on the other side of the room. I didn't want anyone to trip over the cord, so I found a closer power point to be able to plug in the HPLC cord so it no longer ran across the floor. And then there was no longer a possibility of anyone falling over or getting hurt as a result. So some common interview questions, some of them aren't even questions, but statements. Always, you can guarantee that to start things up and to get loosened up a little bit is a little bit about tell me about yourself. So it's good to have a little bit of an elevator pitch ready so that, you know, you've got your first, you know, if somebody asked you to tell about yourself in an interview setting, what are you going to say? What are a few things about you that are really important that you want to make sure that you get out there for a future employer? But some of the other things, why did you apply for this job? Give me an example of a task or project of which you have been particularly proud. Tell me about a difficult team member. This one's very common. So make sure that you have a think about how you can deal with that diplomatically. Tell me something about your experience and chemistry research work. What about your current role do you find most satisfying? What are your strengths? And of course, the famous question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Which all of us in 2015 didn't expect this to be our 2020. So some common traps. Now, this is really important. You don't want to be overly friendly with the interviewer. You want to have a professional relationship in that interview period. So don't be over friendly. It's common not to listen to questions properly, and it's easy to get in your own head. You know, you think you know what the interviewer is about to ask you, so you're already ready with your answer, but you haven't actually listened to what the question was. So make sure that you're fully listening, and even if you have to take a break, you can, and just, you know, say, oh, give me a second to think about that. That's all right. Not knowing the company and a little bit about their competitors, so make sure that you're doing that research. The poor posture or mumbling or speaking slowly, overgeneralizing. You know, it's important that you get across the experiences and who you are to the interviewer, so make sure that you're not overgeneralizing. Give them enough information that they want to ask you further questions. You don't want to make derogatory remarks about past employers. You don't want to interrupt, fidget, or I know this might seem weird, the eating bit, but how many times somebody's been chewing gum during an interview with me? Just make sure that you've got, you know, all of the chewing gum out of your mouth before you go into that interview. You don't want to be late, but if you are going to be late, just make sure that you call ahead so that they know to expect you at a particular time. And Of course, the phone on silent. Just make sure that before you enter the room, you've turned that off, silenced it. In fact, don't just silence it, turn the phone off entirely, because you don't need it during that interview period. So finishing questions. So during your interview, most times you have the opportunity to ask a question at the end. This is really important, and it's actually a good idea to have a couple prepared, because again, it really sets you apart from others if you've got a few ideas of what you could ask at the end of the interview. So some examples could be, you know, what are the challenges I will face as a graduate in this role? Or do you have any concerns that would prevent me from moving on to the next stage? What I like about that second question is it gives you an opportunity to actually resell yourself into the role. So if they do highlight a couple of concerns that they have, you might have another opportunity to give a few examples as to why they should, you know, overcome a few of those obstacles that they have in place for you. And my favorite, the 5 Ps, prior preparation prevents poor performance, which is really important. So get ready in advance for that interview setting. And then Fran's going to take us into the next bit around some specifics around how you can gain a STEM job in Australia.
Thank you, Keely. So there's a lot of different ways and avenues that you can find a STEM job in Australia. One of the avenues that we've already discussed is through our program's website. So you can filter through and look at what kind of jobs you're interested in, whether it's entry positions and location based, whether it's part-time or casual, or, you know, what type of work you're looking for. And as you can see here, there's a variety of roles that we have that's from your entry positions all the way through to your senior positions. And in terms of the job boards that we have, there's a variety. Once again, you have LinkedIn, Gumtree, Career One, Indeed, and one of the most popular being Seek. So it is really important that if you have any, you know, profiles on Seek or LinkedIn, to make sure that is all updated and your CV is updated as well. So with your Seek profile, it is a free service that's provided. You can upload your contact details, your CV with all the relevant details, your volunteer work that you've done and been part of. And that's another way that, I guess, job agencies such as ourselves, as well as employers, are able to tap into talent and find the right match for our employers. So one thing that you can do, and a benefit of using Seek, is that you can set up job alerts. You can classify what type of salary you're looking for, whether it's a casual or a full-time position that you're looking for, and also what industry you want to be working in. So you can set that alert to be once a day, weekly, and that filters through to your emails. And that's a way for the jobs to be coming to you and for you to be up to date with what's happening in the market. Now with social media, all of our consultants, you have Keely Munro, Purvi Mehta, and myself, we are very active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as you know, we need to make sure that we are connected, and networking is crucial to what we do. Any positions, any market insight, any data from our clients that we attain, we do post on social media, and it is advisable to connect with recruiters to make sure that you're not missing out on any information on opportunities. So with social media, we would recommend that you make lots of quality connections. Make sure that any companies that you're interested in working with, you are already following on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and just keeping up to date with what's happening in terms of their internal news, internal pipeline, what's happening, and also just look at job postings that are being posted by those companies that you're interested in. Keely, would you like to touch on the scientific community and networking here?
Sure, yes. So I'm quite passionate, as I said, about the RACI. I'm actually a committee member here in WA as well. So I'm sure you've all heard of it, and also Jordan gave quite an introduction to it. So it is a really great place to get involved. And Dave Samet has also, you know, he's got the mentoring program as well, which I think is just such a great opportunity for early career chemists to get involved and to really pair up with somebody that's already within industry and to help you to get your start and maybe even introduce you to others to help you along. If food science is something of interest to you, there's the AIFST. There's also the AUSIM. So if you're interested in mining, that would be a good one. Oz Biotech, for any of you interested in life sciences. Just really important, the University Open Days as well. It's just such an opportunity to meet potential employers and to find out what opportunities are out there. Those, you know, career expos, the RACI does a lot of them, the university does them as well, so that's really great to get involved with. And it's not necessarily what you know, but it's often who you know, because 80% of jobs are actually known to be landed through networking. So really important to get yourself out there and to meet as many people as you can within your community. Next slide, Fran. So there's lots of places that you can actually use your chemistry degree, which is good for all of us chemists. And I've used my degree in quite a number of these areas that I've highlighted. This isn't an all-inclusive list. There's actually other opportunities out there as well. But teaching is a big one, sales, research, even a lot of chemists go into chemical engineering. You can work in the private sector, you can work in the public sector. Healthcare and pharmaceuticals, they love chemists. Forensic and analytical laboratories, again, love chemists. Consultancy, even law, so you can get into you know, patent law or IP work. It's really interesting and helps the companies get, you know, their patents in place, which is great. There's scientific journalism and scientific communication. And then, of course, recruitment, if you wanted to head down the same path that I found myself down. And then I just thought I would highlight this program that is very special to me. I was involved in launching this 4 years ago. It's the Future Scientist Award. And it's, you know, it was an idea at the time to help graduates jumpstart their career, get them their first start, you know, in the laboratory or to get to their first opportunity within science. The concept came about because it was kind of this, you know, endless cycle. We were doing lots of work with professional communities like the RACI and universities, and we just, you know, we had this pattern of students coming to us to try to find work. And unfortunately, we were unable to place them because a lot of companies were saying they really needed experience. And then, you know, how do students get experience if nobody gives them that first opportunity? So we developed this idea that we launched out of WA. And the idea was to get a group of top science students, finalists that are ready to get into the workforce, and put them in front of a panel of judges that would represent a large number of companies within the area. And what it allowed was kind of a mini interview for each of the finalists with those judges. So instead of going out on 12 or 15 interviews, 12 or 15 companies were coming to this event and listening to a mini interview from each of the finalists, in essence. So it's a great opportunity to jumpstart your career by connecting with leaders in the scientific industry. It's a national competition now, so after the first year was so successful in WA, in which we placed 5 of the finalists, there were 8 finalists, we placed 5 of them into permanent full-time positions as a result of the program, so it was really successful. So we launched it across the country for the year after. So we've had 3 Future Scientist Award programs since that initial one. And it's, as I said, a national competition recognizing excellence in graduate scientists. It allows you the opportunity to share your big ideas. It allows you to present your research and achievements to top potential employers. Last year, we had 14 scientific organizations on our judging panel here in Perth, and each state, so we run it in 5 regions basically, and each winner of each region would win $1,000. And the next slide. So just some testimonials really from some of the past winners. We asked them to give us a why, or what would you say about the award. So one of our winners, actually 2017, said, not only does this competition give you the opportunity to speak in front of industry professionals, it also reminds you how to bridge the gap between studying and landing a job in science. The application process was incredibly easy, and with the benefit on offer, there really is no downside. And then in 2018, it was a good opportunity to present my profile to a wide range of industry leaders. They gave me some advice as to where I can go with my profile and skills. Go for it. It's a great opportunity. It's like having 12 interviews, 12 opportunities in one go. So I would encourage you all to have a little look out for that. We have postponed it because of COVID, and we also a little bit to do with our change in branding, Kelly going across to programs. But I can assure you we have plans in place and we're going ahead, and you'll start to see some information about the program come October, and you will be able to apply in between October and January, and we'll have the awards in February. So watch this space, please, and look out for the Future Scientist Award. And now we're happy to answer any questions that people may have for us.
Yes, so thank you very much, Francisca and Keely, for speaking. It was really insightful hearing a lot about that, the whole HR process. And if I may also just reiterate really briefly as well, I think some really good points were brought up, especially with regards to behavioural questions. Just think, if you've gotten the interview, they probably already like you on paper. The interview questions are an opportunity for you to show a bit of personality, take a bit of initiative, and also, as far as behavioural questions, kind of make it clear or try to show that, you know, you're flexible, you get along with people. I think if you just remain calm, it's pretty straightforward to go through that process. And I'll also, if I may add one other thing as well, I think it's also really great to, as Keely mentioned, to include all these important details in your resume, such as star statements, and to really tailor those to those applications. You don't want to just be machine gunning out generic resumes everywhere, because those are going to have a very low success rate. It's better to go narrow and really make a quality application. That way you're not wasting other people's time as well. But without further ado, thank you. And if anybody has any questions, please ask them. We've got a couple coming in and we can answer those live at the moment. So first of all, we'll start with our friendly neighborhood Dave Samet, who's asking a question. He is asking, how is the job market for early career scientists at the moment? Are there any areas that have more or fewer opportunities?
It's a good question. I can't comment nationally, but I can say in Western Australia, we've had quite a few opportunities for recent graduates. In fact, there have been 3 within biotech and medical devices here in WA in the last week. So that was really pleasing to see. They were all entry-level positions. So really nice to see that opportunity out there. We get lots of opportunities within mining in Western Australia as well, to kickstart and to get experience. So we're seeing that in WA, the areas that have been least affected by COVID have been a lot of the essential services. So, you know, your mining in particular over here, but anything to do with pharmaceuticals, biotech have been really strong, and even manufacturing of essential products as well has been, you know, we've not seen any harsh effects from COVID. In fact, we've seen the opposite, that we've actually been busier in some of those areas and at that entry level as well, which is really, really promising and great to see. And I also think that, you know, just on a business side of things, we're actually being approached by employers more now for entry-level positions. Before Future Scientist Award, that didn't happen as often because it just, you know, it just wasn't what we were known for. We were more known for finding the unfindable. Some of those, you know, really hard to find, difficult to fill roles was what we were kind of known for. But the Future Scientist Award has given us the opportunity to do more and more placements at that entry level.
And just to address,
oh yeah, sure.
Sorry, Jordan, just to address it from the east of Australia, it is very much the same as Keely has mentioned. So all of your essential, you know, manufacturing, your pharmaceutical industries have seen increased activity as a result of COVID. So there are a lot more opportunities in those sectors.
That's very useful to know during these times. Good question to ask there. We have another question from Darshan. Can you tell me more about how international students should approach the opportunity? Because employers may have concerns about visa time. Bit of a tricky question, I imagine, but I think it's worth confronting.
Yeah, I think maybe avoiding the permanent opportunities until you get those confirmed full working rights in Australia. There are so many, though, entry-level casual opportunities that really get you, you know, give you an opportunity to broaden yourself. So it's those temporary, if you remember near the beginning of the presentation, we talked about that temporary versus permanent recruitment. You're going to have a better look in for temporary opportunities because visa's not going to play, you know, play a part within that. But the thing to remember that sometimes the training aspect takes a lot longer than what your visa would allow for. So if you've only got a couple of months left and the company's really looking for somebody long-term, they're probably not going to take that chance just because of the training to get somebody up to speed. They don't want to keep having that recur in their business. So yeah, definitely looking out for those temporary opportunities or casual, you know, short-term contracts, you know, 3, 6, whatever the timeline is on your visa.
Yeah, and if I may add as well, I've met many people through the ECCG who have been on a visa and have either been in the process of approaching such work or have been on the other side of it where they've been able to secure some form of citizenship or working rights. And it can be a grind, but there's definitely a good way through it. It definitely can be done. And I think looking at some of those more short-term roles kind of makes sense at first, but as you build that experience, you will become more valuable and desirable to employers. So worth bearing in mind. We have a few more questions, actually quite a lot. So we'll see how many we can get through. From George Lewis, we have a question. Since you spoke about WA, does it matter if one has a tertiary education in New South Wales to go to WA for work?
Not at all.
No, it doesn't. Any credentials, they don't even have to be Australian credentials as long as they have been assessed in Australia to be the equivalent, then it's fine. The challenge at the moment, of course, with COVID is that there's not as much movement between borders. So if you're based in New South Wales and have had your degree in New South Wales, it's more the fact that you're based in New South Wales that you may not have an opportunity in Western Australia, just because of the challenges of entering our state at the moment.
Good answer. Okay, a few more questions. Bear with me, just having a very quick skim. This is a great question, actually, from Brendan McConnell. As a PhD graduate who has not completed a postdoc, is there anything that would improve my chances of finding a position?
PhD is a tricky one. Are you wanting to do a postdoc and stay within academia? I suppose he can't answer my question, can he? So I'm going to generalize.
I have to assume industry, yeah. Yeah,
so if you're trying to make that transition to industry, sometimes I hate to do this. I came from academia. My husband is an academic. He's got a PhD. And what I hate, and just throwing it out there, in Australia, the PhD isn't recognized the same way it is in other places around the world. In fact, it can hinder sometimes your opportunities for employment. So one thing that I've heard from individuals and has helped to better the chances, and I'm not suggesting that you should or shouldn't do this, but it is to remove the PhD in some cases, just because it may allow you the opportunity to gain the employment. Oftentimes employers have the thought process that you're overqualified, you wouldn't stay very long, you'd be looking for something more advanced quicker than others with a Bachelor of Science, for instance. And sometimes it's around the pace. So in industry, things are very fast and fast moving, and whereas in academia, you're often taking your time to get the correct, everything is a lot slower just to get the correct results for publishing purposes and everything else. So it is a challenging one for PhDs in Australia, because, I come from Canada. You're put at the top of the pack in Canada if you've got a PhD, and same as Europe. But in Australia, for whatever reason, it's the opposite effect. So I think just try to get experience, or to use what you've studied for your PhD as almost like a job in itself. So you could also list it under your work experience, some of the duties of your PhD and some of the research techniques that you had, but definitely expand on that aspect, whatever instrumentation you were using. Yeah, you just make it more like it was a job rather than it was a study.
That's right. So that employers really do look for transferable skills, and if you can highlight that in your CV by your PhD, that's what employers would really, that would cross you over the line, to be honest.
Yeah, and if I may add as well, and that's very insightful, and I've heard this a lot as well while I was at uni. I think this applies especially if you're looking for graduate roles or entry-level jobs. On the flip side of that, I will add as well, do consider that if you have or are doing a PhD, you ultimately are developing a lot of specialist skills. If there are jobs out there that require those specialist skills, you could be indispensable and you could be a top hire. But if you apply for an entry-level role that a whole bunch of other people could also do, you could be seen as overqualified, and why would they hire the person that might expect more out of the job? So I think if you have a PhD, you need to be a bit more strategic, but you can still have amazing outcomes in the process. And those transferable skills really can be very valuable to employers, especially these days as more and more data, I think, gets used within scientific tertiary education. All right. So that was Brendan's question. We have quite a few more. And just in case anybody's listening, I think we'll carry this on till about 8, so about 20 minutes more. Okay, there's a lot more questions regarding PhDs. Bear with me.
I hope I'm not too controversial then.
Oh, no. It's good to be transparent. And I think, like I said, you got to be targeted. It's not always the right fit for all jobs.
I think my best advice, if I can just jump in again, I think my best advice is that networking piece, though. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And if you can show who you are and how you fit within an organization in a one-to-one setting, that's better than the resume that's one in a pile. It's definitely the networking piece that's going to set you apart. We had last year the Future Scientist Award. The winner was actually someone with a PhD, and I've never had so much interest in somebody with a PhD before, but she really wowed them all, and they could all see how she could help their company in such big opportunities available there. But I think if they had seen the resume without having met her in person, they would have straight away discarded her as being overqualified and not being able to have much value add. Whereas that networking piece, that opportunity to say who you are and to sell yourself, really set and gave her that boost up on her career, basically.
That's really good insight. So we've got another wide range of questions. I've just had a moment to screen some of them. I think this is an interesting one up here. What do you think is the #1 skill a chemist should have, and how should you develop this? Yeah, it's a bit of a high pressure question.
I think someone said it earlier. I think maybe it was you, Jordan, about the attention to detail. I think it's something that we're known for as chemists. In my work, it causes a bit of problems for me because my attention to detail is too good, and everybody knows me as the person that spots the problems. And I think that's oftentimes who you are, and the reason that you've gone into chemistry is oftentimes because you have a little bit of that attention to detail. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I think it's definitely one area that chemists are known for anyways. Yeah.
Francisco, would you agree?
I agree. I think everyone we all agree, Keely.
Yeah. And I will add, if you are going to put that in your resume, please evidence it, because it's easy to say, but you should have some kind of example to back it up. An interesting one, especially for the modern era, how should we approach an online interview via Zoom, for instance, especially if it is the first interview?
Great question. I've been prepping lots of people for Zoom interviews recently, so COVID definitely made it a bit different in the land of recruitment. But the first thing is you still dress as though you're going on an interview. So make sure that you're still in your formal wear, not your ball gown, as I said before. Make sure that you're in your business suit or business attire to make your best impression. And make sure that you have, maybe find a spot in your home. I've not done a good example of this right now, but try to find a spot in your home that's completely neutral in the background. So if you've got a white wall, maybe in, wherever in your home. In my home, when I'm doing an interview, I do it in the dining room, and in behind that is just a white wall, and I sit at the table, and it's perfect. You can't see anything but that white background, so there's no distractions. And you definitely want to make sure, if you don't have a neutral background like that, that you're not going to have anything passing by in the background. So don't do it in front of a window, for instance, with outside the window, because things could be moving and it's very distracting for the interviewer. And same with, like, if you've got people at home with you or pets, just make sure that they're I was going to say locked away, but maybe don't lock away your loved ones, but just make sure that they know that what you're doing is happening, so that they can be quiet and that you don't have any of that movement in the background.
I think ultimately that interview is a reflection of how you could be in the workplace. So just try to show that. Yeah, very relevant at the moment. I literally just went through one of these processes, so definitely bear that in mind. You'll probably come across a lot of applications at the moment that are doing online interviews. What else have we got? This is an interesting one as well. From Devika Rajama, could you please tell me, how is the job market for medicinal and synthetic organic chemistry researchers now? What are the major industries in the field?
Yeah, so there's, I can only really comment WA again, I'm sorry, but in WA, we've got quite a number of research organizations. You've got your Telethon Kids, we've got, off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of some of the other companies, but oftentimes those are really good spots for the PhD backgrounds as well. If you've got that synthetic organic experience, those companies are often calling out for the right experience. So there are a number. I think, you also have an opportunity to transition into some other industries as well, or a little bit different, pharmaceuticals, for instance, becoming a QC chemist. There's opportunities for that. Even in biotech and medical devices, there's opportunities to use the skills that you might have from an organic or a medicinal synthesis background. But as far as using them the way that you've studied them to be, there are a lot of companies within Australia that are looking for those skill sets. And oftentimes, I don't know about, whether or not you want to go international, and obviously right now, During COVID times, it's not the right time, but there are also lots of opportunities around the globe. So, you know, it's an easy one to move from place to place. And in fact, a lot of people get sponsored from overseas for those roles in Australia, because it is a very rare skill set and one that is in demand.
Very good answer to a very technical question, or a very specialized question, I should say. This is an interesting one that I hadn't thought about. Should I mention my visa condition in my document? So I assume application.
Good question. I have different thoughts on this at different times of the day. So I think, you know, if you've got permanent residency and it's not clear from your resume that you would have permanent residency, I think definitely highlight it. Make sure that that is loud and proud at the top, so that there's no reason for an employer not to give your resume a chance. I think if you're on a graduate visa and you've studied in Australia and maybe worked in Australia, maybe leave it off to begin with and then overcome that obstacle later once you have the chance for the interview or the phone screen to explain what you're working, you know, what your rights are at that stage. It's definitely a question that will come up. Every phone screen that I do every single day has that question: what are your working rights in Australia? It just means that, you know, if you've got a graduate visa though, I might just have to consider you for a different opportunity than I'd originally thought of you for. But we definitely have lots of individuals on visas in work every single day in Australia. So lots of opportunities for you to gain employment. I think PR, definitely put it loud and proud on your resume. If it's not PR, maybe leave it off until you have the opportunity to speak to someone.
Thank you for the strategy consult there. All right, this is a very scary question from an anonymous attendee. Are there 50, 100 or 200 graduates applying for entry-level jobs? What are the odds of getting an interview in the first place?
Good question. I can comment on this because I've just done 3 entry-level positions. There were approximately 200 applicants for the biotech role. Not all 200 applicants were relevant, so didn't even have the right degree or qualifications. So straight away, those people are not going to be considered. So anyone on this call, if you've got a chemistry degree, you would have made the first round of calling. You would have been in still from that point onwards. There's just a lot of people that I think COVID especially has led to more and more applications from desperate individuals trying to find employment. So, you know, they have no science background whatsoever in applying for those jobs. So of those 200, maybe there were 100 that had some form of a scientific background. How we go through those is a bit of a painful process when it comes to entry-level positions, because we're not necessarily looking for experience any longer, because it's oftentimes, you know, our clients want somebody that's going to gel with their team. So it's knowing our customer and our client and what kind of personality is going to fit in well with their team. So in those cases, you're more likely to get a call from the recruiter. At least that's my process. So I had a lot of phone screens with a lot of people because I didn't care about experience. I was looking for the right attitudes to fit in with the team. So I know that doesn't necessarily give you anything to go on there, but I think, you know, those that did have a little bit of experience definitely warranted an earlier call than some of the others. So, you know, if you can get yourself some, you know, voluntary experience, if you do your honors, for instance, make sure that's very prominent on your resume. The honors, especially what you researched during your honors, is really important. Some people forget to leave, you know, and leave that off. They just, you know, BSc and then BSc honors, and they haven't actually put in any of the research that they had done. But that is really, really important to set yourself apart from others. Even, you know, if there was a special project that you did, you know, here in WA, they often have a unit in their Bachelor of Science in molecular genetics that is around, you know, it's a special project that they do as a team, and they're given, you know, a set of gene, and they have to kind of identify, you know, the gene strain that they're looking at. But even that is something that sets one individual out over another, because it just shows some, you know, in-depth experience and some research that they had to do. So yeah, anything that you can grab hold of your experience and kind of highlight is really important.
And if I may add to that, Keely, instrumentation as well. So if you list down what type of instrumentation you have worked with or you have knowledge of, it is definitely beneficial, because sometimes we are given a prerequisite by our clients and our employers that this is what I'm looking for, it's HPLC or so on, and we'll be looking at the CV for those kind of list of instrumentation that you've worked with.
So yeah, I guess the take-home message there is, if there is many graduates, don't be afraid, because, many people applying for a job, don't be afraid, because if you meet the selection criteria, you'll be in the very small bucket of people that actually make it through to consideration. So I guess just be honest and maybe ambitious, but not, you know, too ambitious with your application. And I think you can be quite confident. All right. This is an interesting one as well. So we seem to have had people from all over Australia, it seems, asking questions about their specific industry. So here we have from Anonymous: which industry is in high demand at the moment in Victoria? I'm particularly interested in the pharmaceutical industry, but it seems like there are not many job opportunities available in this area. I think Francisca already touched on this a bit, but if you want to expand, feel free.
So again, in terms of at the moment for graduates, there aren't that many positions in Victoria that we have noticed. It's more the niche positions in Victoria. Again, in terms of, bear with me, so in terms of the industry, was it?
Sorry,
where did that question go?
All good. Sorry, there we go. Which industry is in high demand at the moment in Victoria? I'm particularly interested in the pharmaceutical industry, but it seems like there are not many available jobs at the moment.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, and Keely had mentioned as well, manufacturing, your pharmaceuticals, those types of industries are seeing influx of activity. I really can't comment on what the jobs are in Victoria at this stage.
Food industry is doing really well in Victoria. Again, essential services, anything that's essential, but major hubs for food science are New South Wales and Victoria, and Victoria even more so. So lots of opportunity within food science. So sometimes that's lab testing, especially like any laboratory services to do with environmental testing and COVID testing as well. Those are really prominent, and we're still seeing lots of opportunities there. Sometimes though, it's just, you know, if you really want to get into pharmaceuticals and they're not the opportunities right now, sometimes it's reaching out to those companies directly and showing your interest and trying to gain an opportunity that way. But the other thing is, maybe don't pigeonhole yourself into that. Maybe give, you know, if there's another lab tech role, at least you're broadening and getting some work experience that the next time there's a pharmaceutical role that comes up, you'll be ready with a little bit more experience to set yourself apart. So I think just gain whatever experience that you can at the moment, and just keeping your eyes on where those essential services and growing industries are. And really easy to do on Seek as well when you're doing a little bit of your own research. You can check on Seek, you can check, you can filter it to your science and technology, and then see, filter it to Victoria if that was your state, and see what opportunities are out there, because it'll give you a really good indication of which industries are doing well and which ones aren't doing so well.
Another great follow-up with regards to the specialties available or different industries available right now in Australia. I will just briefly interrupt to say right now that we have about 7 minutes left, 5 questions left. And there are some questions I've dismissed just because they're a little bit too specific to one individual. Feel free, of course, to get in contact with a recruitment agency such as Kelly Services, or like the Early Career Chemist group are also happy to answer questions within our scope, like what we can answer, if it's very particular and tailored. but I'm just going to try to keep it to answers or questions that I think apply to as many people as possible. So from another anonymous attendee, this is I think a very fun question, nice and positive. Can you give some examples of what made applications you've seen stand out?
Yeah, good one. Oftentimes bad ones stand out more than good ones, though, in my mind. So I'm going to have a little bit of a think. I think pictures oftentimes come into it. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about pictures, but they've definitely stood out. I used to work in Japan, so I'm used to a resume that has to have a picture, and in Japan you have to put your picture on your resume. It's not so commonplace in Australia, but it is, you know, it makes it a little bit different. But just make sure it's a good picture. I've seen some really terrible pictures of people on their resume. So that's important. I think different formats as well sometimes stand out a little bit better than others. You know, I can't particularly say. I quite like a simple resume as well, though, that's easy to follow, because sometimes if you think about how the potential employer is receiving these applications, it's usually coming in, give you a little bit of behind the scenes, but it's coming into an applicant tracking system, right? So this is this system that we log into every day to see our resumes. And this isn't just recruitment industry, large employers, they all have the same applicant tracking systems. So the resumes come through, and certain ones are easier to read than others, and those tend to be the ones that have come through in a Word document. So if you're using something that's a little bit fancier of a style, you usually want to lock it to a PDF. But the thing is that can sometimes risk how it's being viewed on the other end. And you know, if we're talking 2.5 seconds per view, it may just not make the cut because it just hasn't come through properly. So I think fancy, funky resumes are awesome, but I think maybe send those through to somebody's email rather than applying directly to an advertisement necessarily with them. Does that make sense, Fran? Did that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. When it comes to, I guess, this job that you're applying for, be mindful of that. I have seen great CVs being submitted for marketing positions, and they showcase who they are as a marketing specialist with their CVs. So again, be mindful as to what kind of position you're applying for when considering how to stand out.
Great answers. And I think as Killian Francisca mentioned, like with 2.5 seconds to, on average, look at some of these applications, you can't make these applications super dense. You can't make it illegible. Clear, concise, something nice and clean, white space. It really helps. Do take sympathy on the recruiters as well who have to process all of this. Do applications submitted earlier have a higher chance of being selected?
Not necessarily.
It depends. So sometimes we're in a hurry, especially with the casual, you know, temporary opportunities. So sometimes those you will have a better opportunity because it'll say though an immediate start on the advertisement. And when we say immediate start, we are looking as immediate as we can. So we are looking at those applications every day, you know, twice a day sometimes, to see who's come through and if there's anybody relevant for that role. When we're doing a permanent recruitment drive, oftentimes it wouldn't matter because we might wait, you know, and shortlist altogether with all the applications. So I think oftentimes, you know, if it says applications close on somebody's advertisement, the chances are whether you apply early or late won't matter. But when it's the open-ended ones that don't have an application close date, that those ones, the sooner you can apply, you are probably better off.
Very cool. We have just 2 minutes left, so hopefully we can get a good answer in still. From Shirley Haiti, we have, does having experience in multiple industries make you look indecisive in your job goal?
I don't think so. I quite like broadened experience personally when I'm looking at applicants. But there's a difference, you know, sometimes if we're talking 2 months here, 1 month there, 3 months there, that can give a, you know, sometimes early in your career though it won't matter, but I mean later on in life and after many placements, if you're still only getting 2 months at a time, people might question why are they such short opportunities. But I think, you know, if you've got longer periods with lots of different industries, I think it's such a benefit. You know, what you know from one industry could mean the change in, you know, a process improvement in a different industry. You know, you might just be the change that was needed. So I think it's always a huge help rather than a hinder.
I'd agree, being cross-functional can be really valuable for certain teams. They sometimes need a bit of a breath of fresh air to mix things up. I would say that's probably time to call it with the questions. There's still a few more, but of course you can always contact these two lovely recruiters. You can always contact the Early Careers Chemist group as well. And if I could just ask Keely and Francisca to reiterate, so what was the best form or way for people to get in touch with either of you or with Kelly Services?
Yes, email. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put my email address in the chat. Maybe Fran can do the same. That's probably the best way.
That way I'm not just telling people to ask questions, but then leaving them in the dark. So thank you. And while Keely and Fran are doing that, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending. We actually had quite a high attendance for this event. So I think it's quite obvious everyone's interested, probably a little bit due to COVID anxiety, but also I think, like I said earlier, simply attending events like this, I don't want to see it as making you more cutthroat competitive so much as making you a more valuable candidate and helping you understand what you want so that you're better prepared. Thank you for attending. There were some really insightful questions, and I will see some of you, or hopefully all of you, at another Early Careers Chemist group in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Jordan, there's just a message from Dave right now about the camaraderie that's going on tomorrow. So just have a little look on the website on RACI or look in the chat there. Dave will be providing you information, I'm sure, in the little chat box there to let you know about that. So yeah, there's a camaraderie tomorrow and then there's careers webinar later this month.
Sure, thanks for catching that. And I will say a lot of people that have gone through Dave's mentoring program or through camaraderie, they've had a lot of positive experience, and I've met some people that have gone to some pretty interesting industries as a result with some pretty interesting roles. So definitely something worth considering. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.